why it would suck to wake up as a Kruleboy. Imagine opening your eyes one morning, or, let's be real, blinking awake in a stinking mud puddle and realizing you've just been born as a Kruleboy. One of the so-called Orruks of Ghur, with scaly green skin stretched over wiry muscles, yellow reptilian eyes blinking against the swamp gas. Congratulations! Your new life is going to be one long, damp, squelching misery. First off, let's talk about where you live. Because, spoiler alert, it's the fens, bogs, marshes, and endless fetid mires of Ghur, the realm of beasts. And you might think, oh cool, like a nice tropical wetland, bit of birdsong, shimmering waters. Nope, this is Ghur. Everything wants to eat you, the water wants to drown you, the fog wants to poison you, even the reeds have thorns sharp enough to gut a grog, the insects are the size of your clenched green fist and carry venom potent enough to drop a more crucier. And that's just the scenery. Your home, if you can call it that, is a shambolic collection of half-rotted wooden platforms lashed together with sinew and scrap iron. Sometimes the floorboards are suspiciously soft because a bog monster is tunneling up underneath. The whole place stinks of mildew, fish guts, stale blood, and something best left unnamed. You sleep with one eye open because your neighbor might stab you in the ribs to steal your skewer of marsh frog legs. Because Kruleboyz, they're not called cruel for nothing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up and talk about the basic facts of your new body. You're taller and leaner than the average Orruk, with a long hooked nose, pointed teeth, and a grin that makes mortal folk very nervous. Your limbs are ropey, your skin sometimes patterned with faint scales, and your eyes gleam with mean intelligence. Unlike your bulkier iron-jaw cousins who settle everything with brute force, you Kruleboyz live for trickery, cunning, and stabbing folks in the dark. You've basically been born into the race of the bog's most professional backstabbers. From the moment you can crawl, you're trained to be sneaky. Your elders teach you how to move silently across swamp bridges, how to vanish behind curtains of mist, and how to smear yourself in swamp gunk so nobody sees you coming. Kruleboyz believe that killing an enemy face to face is kind of a last resort. Much better to poison them, ambush them, or lure them into a monster's jaws. And yeah, there's a certain logic there, except that your own mates might be planning the same thing for you. Because that's the other problem with being a Kruleboy. Constant paranoia. Trust is in very short supply. Kruleboyz lie, cheat, and backstab not just other races, but each other. Your boss might shiv you in the back just to prove a point, or because he wants your fancy rusted blade. Ambition is deadly here. If you get too good at fighting or sneaking, someone's bound to notice and make sure you disappear. The only reason you'd survive long enough to be called a killer boss is because you've become the sneakiest, cruelest bastard in the swamp. Speaking of killer bosses, let's talk hierarchy. Because the Kruleboy society runs on equal parts violence, cunning, and whoever can gather the biggest gang of stabby friends. At the top sits the killer boss, often decked out in scavenged armor plates with a skull-faced shield and an enormous cleaver, but his power is always fragile. He's got to keep his boys loyal, which means sharing loot, proving he's tough, and preferably arranging for all his rivals to slip on mysteriously placed spikes. Below him, you've got all sorts of specialized Kruleboyz, Gutripaz, the rank-and-file stabbers, the rank-and-file stabbers. They carry wickedly curved blades and like to swarm enemies 5 to 1. Man, skewer bolt boys, your swamp archers wielding massive crossbows the size of a tree trunk. They prefer to drop enemies before they can get close. Swamp caller shamans, weird sorcerers who bubble up strange potions, call on swamp spirits, and occasionally explode in showers of green ichor when the magic goes wrong. Hobgrot Slittaz, not true Orruks, but sneaky little mercenaries who love setting traps, tossing bombs, and generally being treacherous little gits. So, imagine it's your first day as a Kruleboy. You crawl out of the muck, brush the leeches off your arms, and realize you're supposed to earn your place in the tribe. That might mean running errands for the shaman-like gathering venom from the back of a Maya snake that could swallow you whole. Or sneaking into another warclan's camp to filch their boss's favourite squig. Or simply murdering someone to prove you got the stomach for it. And if you're hoping for quiet days spent whittling swamp reeds and eating frog legs in peace, forget it! The Kruleboyz are constantly at war with, well, everyone. Stormcast Eternals, Sylvaneth, Seraphon, Cities of Sigmar, all are enemies. The Kruleboyz see the entire mortal realms as a place full of victims waiting to be ambushed. Raids are frequent, brutal, and preferably surprising. Kruleboyz love to strike from mist-shrouded waters, shooting foes with poisoned bolts or releasing caged monsters to sow chaos. They delight in psychological warfare, false retreats, horrific traps, whispering threats in the darkness. Because being a Kruleboy also means dealing with the reality of Ghur. You know what else lives in those swamps? Gulping mire. Worms big enough to snap your bones in one bite. Razor-winged insects with toxin-drenched stingers. Carnivorous reeds that yank you under the water. And if it's not the wildlife, it's the terrain itself. Mud sucks off your boots. Quicksand opens beneath your feet. Fog rolls in so thick you can't see your own nose, and that's when a rival war clan might choose to pounce. Then there's the food. Kruleboyz live on whatever they can scrounge: swamp fungus, boiled toadstools, chunks of fish, and whatever animals are unlucky enough to fall into their traps. Nothing is ever quite fresh. Everything tastes faintly of mildew and bitter iron. And the shaman's potions? Good luck with those. Sometimes they give you supernatural strength. Other times, they liquefy your guts. Still, you're part of something bigger. Kruleboyz believe the swamp itself is alive, that the bog spirits watch them, whisper secrets, and demand tribute in blood and fear. They speak of the mists as if they have minds of their own. Their shamans call upon murky powers, swirling up greenish fumes, muttering curses that can warp flesh or cloud the enemy's vision. Magic is both a tool and a deadly risk. It's just as likely to backfire, causing your head to explode into a cloud of flies. Yet even with all the constant hazards, the Kruleboyz love their way of life. They thrive on cunning, traps, and the glee of knowing they've outwitted their prey. There's a certain pride in being the ones who bring fear to the mortal realms. Even Stormcast Eternals tread carefully in the swamps because they've learned the hard way that Kruleboyz are masters of the ambush. So yeah, imagine waking up as a Kruleboy. You'd better like mud. You'd better like treachery. And you better keep one hand on your knife at all times, because that's the only way you'll stay alive long enough to enjoy the next raid. Or, at the very least, live to see tomorrow's sunrise filtering through the misty green glow of Ghur. Because as a Kruleboy, trust is weakness. Cruelty is strength. And the swamp always hungers for more blood. Of course, waking up as a Kruleboy means you'll also learn the harsh truth about leadership, because sure, you might have dreams of someday becoming a killer boss. Maybe striding around with a big skull-faced shield, your cleaver dripping with the blood of your enemies, barking orders to a mob of Gutripas. But here's the problem. That job is basically an open invitation for someone else to poison your brew, rig your bridge to collapse, or shove a dagger between your ribs. You see, leadership among the Kruleboyz is a bloody seesaw of power. The moment you rise too high, everyone's watching for the slightest sign of weakness. Get too fat on loot, someone will decide you're soft. Show mercy, someone will call you a coward. Lose one skirmish, your own second-in-command will be eyeing your spot before the bodies are even cold. And let's not forget the rituals. Oh, the rituals. Kruleboyz are deeply superstitious, and their shamans claim to read omens in swamp gas bubbles or the patterns of floating frog corpses. There are bog rites for almost everything, for new weapons, new bosses, new alliances, even new squigs. Sometimes you'll be forced to drink vile potions as part of these ceremonies, your stomach clenching as weird green smoke coils out of your ears. If you're lucky, the potion makes you see visions of glory. If you're unlucky, it melts your tongue. Kruleboyz love cruel weapons. Nothing straightforward, like a nice clean sword. No, your kind prefers things that cause agony and psychological terror. Jagged gut-rapaz blades, skewer bolts with barbs designed to tear flesh, poisons that make your enemies claw at their throats as they choke and die. It's all part of the Kruleboy aesthetic. And believe me, it's not just for enemies. Kruleboyz will show off their fancy new weapons to each other, and it's practically a game to see who can come up with the nastiest new toxin or the most creatively vicious trap. One day it's a net of barbed wire rigged to spring from a tree. The next day, it's a bucket of venomous swamp wasps dangling over a doorway, and everyone laughs when someone else takes a wrong step. That is, unless it's you. Then you're the punchline. Living as a Kruleboy means never letting your guard down. Even your downtime is stressful. You might be patching holes in your rusted armor, trying to scrape off the leeches, or arguing with a hobgrot about whose turn it is to clean the bog lanterns. And hobgrots. Let's talk about those slippery little gits for a second. They're your so-called allies, hired mercenaries who love gold almost as much as they love explosions. They'll follow your orders for a while, but the moment a shinier offer comes along, they'll vanish faster than swamp mist at dawn. Kruleboyz keep them around because they're excellent saboteurs, bomb makers, and spies. But if you trust a hobgrot too far, you'll find yourself waking up tied to a log, about to be offered as tribute to the great gulping mireworm. Now let's talk about those alliances. As a Kruleboy, you'll discover that your tribe sometimes teams up with other Orruk war clans, like the Ironjaws, those massive slab-sided brutes who think subtlety is something you do with a bigger hammer. Working with Ironjaws is like babysitting rabid rhinoxen. They charge in, screaming, smash everything, and then complain that your traps slowed them down. Meanwhile, you might also find yourself following the commands of a Kruleboy warboss who claims to have heard Gorkamorka's voice booming from the depths of a swamp. Or worse, some shamans insist they've spoken directly to swamp spirits who demand a blood sacrifice. That usually means someone's getting flayed. Fingers crossed it's not you. All this means constant danger from your own side. One day, you're out on a raid, creeping through a fog-choked marsh. Next thing you know, the Gutrapaz ahead of you gets spooked by a bog monster. Break formation, and you're left screaming as an entire Cities of Sigmar warband descends on your position. And don't expect mercy if you survive and limp back to camp. No one wants a coward in the tribe. You'll be forced to prove yourself all over again. Kruleboyz have a brutal sense of humor. They love humiliating enemies, and sometimes each other. They'll tie prisoners to stakes in the swamp and leave them there as bait for monsters or for rival armies. They paint terrifying symbols on their shields, meant to frighten opponents into fleeing before the first blade swings. It's all about psychological warfare. If you can terrify your foes into running away, that's a perfect victory. No one even has to get muddy. Except that's rare, because eventually someone always fights back. Your daily life revolves around raids and ambushes. Kruleboyz prefer hit-and-run tactics. They strike from mists, hurling javelins or firing man, skewer bolts. They plant spikes in trails. And if things go south, they vanish into the bog, leaving traps and poison clouds behind. You might live to see another sunrise, or you might not. But it's not just humans and elves you've got to worry about. Ghur is a realm of monsters. Mire, worms with jaws big enough to swallow 3 Orruks at once, mosquitoes the size of wolves, sludge drakes that lurk under green scum, waiting to lunge upward and drag you into a watery grave. Even the trees sometimes uproot themselves and chase intruders away, screeching like banshees. You're never safe, not even in your own camp, and yet, somehow, the Kruleboyz thrive. They see the swamp as a place of power, a sacred domain where outsiders fear to tread. Their shamans insist that the bog spirits grant them visions of conquest and reveal secrets hidden in the fog. They genuinely believe they're chosen by Gorkamorka, the brutal twin-headed god who embodies both cunning and violence. Every successful ambush, every terrified scream of an enemy confirms their faith. But let's be honest, it's still a miserable existence. You're perpetually wet. Your skin itches. Your food is rotten. Everyone wants to kill you or replace you. And should you ever grow old, which is rare, you'll probably be seen as weak and either exiled, sacrificed, or stabbed in the back. Yet there's an undeniable thrill in being part of the Kruleboyz. The rush of executing the perfect trap. The wicked glee of watching enemies stumble into your barbed pits. The pride in knowing that even the mighty Stormcast tread carefully in the fens. So if you ever wake up as a Kruleboy, remember, keep your knife sharp, your ears open, and your secrets closer. Because in the swamp, the biggest predator might be standing right beside you wearing the same sneer. If you think the swamp is bad, wait until you have to follow a killer boss into battle. Imagine slogging through waist-deep muck, your boots squelching with every step, the air thick with the smell of decay and swamp gas, and your boss is up ahead waving you forward with a massive cleaver, screaming at you to keep quiet because there's an enemy patrol nearby. And you'd better keep quiet. Kruleboyz pride themselves on stealth. They're the rare Orruks who believe that fighting fair is for idiots. Why meet your enemy in open battle when you can stab them in the dark, poison their water supply, or set their camp ablaze and pick off the survivors? That's the Kruleboy way. Strike from the shadows, sow fear, and fade away. But don't think that makes life easy. Hiding in swamps means you're constantly cold, damp, and covered in insects. Your armor rusts faster than you can clean it. Mold grows in your boots. You might go for days without proper food, gnawing on swamp fungus or swamp fish that taste like rotting leather. And then there's the ever-present threat of something huge bursting from the water to eat you whole. Kruleboyz live in places even other Orruks won't go. They make their homes in stinking fens, tangled marshes, and bogs where the air glows faintly green and strange lights flicker under the water. They build ramshackle forts out of driftwood lashed together with swamp vines. Platforms stand on stilts rising above the water, connected by rickety bridges that sway with every step. One loose plank and you're plunging into the depths, possibly into the waiting maw of a mireworm. They know every patch of quicksand, every hidden pool of venomous slimes. The swamp is their shield. Outsiders rarely venture in, and those who do often don't come back. It's the perfect terrain for ambushes and traps, and Kruleboyz are masters of both. Speaking of traps, you'll discover very quickly that being a Kruleboy means being surrounded by lethal contraptions. Spiked pits, hidden snares, tripwires rigged to drop nets of thorns. Sometimes the traps are so clever that even the Kruleboyz forget where they put them. It's not uncommon for an unlucky Ghur to get impaled on his own side spike trap. The rest will laugh for days, assuming the poor sod survives. Their shamans, the Swamp Kala shamans, are a sight to behold. Their skinny, robed figures covered in dangling charms, frog bones, and little flasks of luminous goop. They wield powerful magic pulled from the fetid waters and boiling bog vapors. They brew elixirs that make warriors stronger or turn them into gibbering wrecks if the dose is off. But the shamans hold enormous sway because they're said to commune with Gorkamorka himself or the spirits of the swamp, depending on who you ask. One minute they're croaking prophecies about glorious raids, the next they're screaming that the entire tribe must sacrifice squigs to appease the bog god. And no one dares challenge them, because even the biggest killer boss knows a Swamp Kala shaman can curse you into a gibbering, slime-covered heap. Kruleboyz value cunning over brute strength, but that doesn't mean they're weak. In battle, they fight dirty. Ghur advance in long lines with cruel blades designed to gut an enemy rather than simply kill them. Boltboys lurk in the shadows, armed with huge crossbows called man-skewer bows. One volley from those things can turn even a heavily armored knight into a pincushion. And then there are monsters. Kruleboyz love beasts. Swamp-dwelling monstrosities like mere-brute troggoths, lumbering brutes covered in dripping algae and reeking of wet earth. Or sludgeraker beasts, huge reptilian creatures that slither through the mud and snap up foes in their jaws. If you're a Kruleboy, you might end up riding one of these beasts into battle. Sounds impressive, right? Until you realize that these monsters sometimes decide to eat their riders. Social structure among the Kruleboyz is, well, let's just say complicated. It's all about fear and respect. A killer boss holds power so long as he inspires enough terror to keep challengers at bay. The second he shows weakness, someone else will take his place. Loyalty is fleeting. Alliances shift like bog mist. Today you're following one boss. Tomorrow he's floating face down in the swamp and you're kneeling to the next. And don't get cozy with your fellow Ghur either. They're just as likely to shove you forward when the arrows start flying. Kruleboyz respect strength and cleverness, but trust is thin as frog skin. If you're too successful, others might decide to bring you down a peg, usually with poison or a convenient accident in the swamp. Yet for all the danger, there's a twisted pride in being a Kruleboy. You know secrets no one else does. You can slip through shadows, strike fear into the hearts of entire armies, and disappear without a trace. Even Sigmar's Stormcast tread carefully when they hear the guttural croaks and rattles of Kruleboy war horns echoing through the mist. So sure, you'll spend your days caked in mud, ducking arrows and dealing with backstabbing allies. But you'll also feel a wicked satisfaction when your traps work, when your enemies scream and run, when your poisoned blades drop a noble hero in his shining armor. That's the Kruleboy way. And if you somehow live long enough, maybe you'll be the one striding around with a skull mask and a retinue of Gutripaz hanging on your every word. Just remember, keep your eyes open, your blade sharper than your tongue, and always, always watch your back. And let's not forget where you'd be living if you woke up as a Kruleboy. Most likely, it's the swamps of Ghur, the realm of beasts. Ghur is savage and teeming with life that wants to eat you, or worse. The lands are shaped by primal instincts, and even the ground sometimes tries to swallow you whole. For the Kruleboyz, it's paradise. They thrive in places no sane mortal would dare enter. Mangrove forests with trees twisted into claw-like shapes, pools of phosphorescent slime bubbling in the dark, clouds of insects that swarm so thick they choke you, and under the water, there's always something slithering, watching, waiting to drag you under. Yet to a Kruleboy, these swamps are a fortress. They're filled with secret paths and hidden watchposts. Intruders get lost, panic, and end up bogged down or fall prey to the creatures lurking beneath the surface. Kruleboyz guide their tribes through the mist, slipping from shadow to shadow. It's a living labyrinth, and they know every turn. Even their forts, known as ruck forts, look like hunks of debris from a shipwreck, stacked high and lashed together. But don't be fooled, they're cunningly built. Bridges hang over deep pits. Walkways twist into sudden dead ends. If you're an enemy trying to storm a ruck fort, there's a good chance you'll find yourself stumbling into a cage, set ablaze, or skewered on hidden spikes. And for you, as a newly minted Kruleboy, life inside these forts is crowded, loud, and pungent. The air stinks of swamp rot, cooked squig meat, and the acrid tang of Swamp Kala shaman brews. The forts are alive with constant squabbles, Gutrippers bickering over loot, bolt boys checking their bows for swamp gunk, and shamans muttering to their jars of swamp spirits. Don't expect privacy ever. Hammocks hang inches apart. Food is communal. A bubbling cauldron of something unidentifiable but guaranteed to give you nightmares. Arguments break out over who gets the juiciest bit, and if you're not careful, you'll wind up with a dagger in your ribs because you accidentally took someone's frog leg. Let's talk about how the Kruleboyz fight. They're obsessed with psychological warfare. Poison is their favorite weapon. Their shamans craft noxious brews that blister flesh and cloud minds. It's not enough for them to kill an enemy. They want to see the enemy suffer, to hear them scream. That's how they know they've won. On the battlefield, Kruleboyz advance behind curtains of swamp gas conjured by their shamans. They whisper in guttural tones, coordinating ambushes and flanking maneuvers. Then, when the moment's right, they surge forward in a tide of spears, nets, and hooks. Their Gutripaz carry wickedly curved blades designed to inflict maximum agony. They aim for tendons, joints, soft spots in armor. Meanwhile, the bolt boys rain down bolts from hiding places, picking off enemy leaders or sowing chaos among the ranks. Kruleboyz love traps. Pitfalls covered with rotting leaves, spite-filled trenches, collapsing walkways rigged to drop intruders into sludge pits. And they take immense pride in these creations. The more gruesome and humiliating the trap, the more it's celebrated. And when they're not fighting mortals, they're contending with the monsters of Ghur. The Kruleboyz coexist with monstrous creatures like sludgeraker beasts who prowl the swamps on thick, clawed limbs. To tame such a beast is both a mark of status and an act of pure madness. One moment, your sludgeraker might obediently snap up an enemy. The next, it decides you look tastier. So if you woke up as a Kruleboy, be prepared for a constant undercurrent of tension. You're not just fighting the enemy, You're fighting your own environment, your own tribe's ambitions, and the swamp itself. And that's not even getting into the looming influence of Kragnos, the end of empires, the monstrous godlike creature whose rampages across Ghur have upended entire regions. The Kruleboyz view Kragnos with a mix of awe and opportunism, hoping to ride the chaos he leaves in his wake for their own gain. Religiously, Kruleboyz are a mixed bag. Many of them worship Mork, or sometimes Gork. It's complicated, the cunning half of the Orruk gods. They believe Mork values trickery, ambushes, and cleverness. But they're also superstitious as hell. Bad omens are everywhere. Croaking frogs, ripples in the swamp water, the number of squig bites you suffer in a week. A single bad sign can send an entire warband scurrying back into the swamp to wait out the bad juju. But if you're thinking of defecting or leaving, think again. There's nowhere else to go. The other factions of the mortal realms hate the Kruleboyz. Cities of Sigmar despise them as vermin and raiders. Sylvaneth view them as swamp blight needing eradication. Even other Orruks look at Kruleboyz sideways, considering them creepy and untrustworthy. So you're stuck. You're a cunning, mean-spirited little git who survives by your wits, your knife, and your ability to read swamp signs. And in a place as violent and primal as Ghur, that might not be such a terrible thing, if you can handle the mud, the backstabbing, and the monsters. And remember, if you're going to wake up as a Kruleboy, keep your boots dry, your blades sharp, and your eyes open. Because in the swamps of Ghur, everything, including your so-called mates, is out to get you. And now, let's consider how your daily life would look if you found yourself born as one of these sneaky, mud-caked gits. From the moment you wake up, usually to the sound of squabbling, croaking swamp creatures and the stench of fungus stew, you'd better be ready for a day of careful navigation. Not just through the swamp, but through the constant scheming of your fellow Kruleboyz. Your tribe's ruck fort might be built high on platforms over the bog, lashed together from driftwood, bones, and rusted iron plates. The boards creak beneath your feet, and you're always half expecting a plank to break away, dropping you into the festering water below. That's not an accident either. The fort's rigged with hidden collapses to dump intruders or unlucky gits into the muck. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a communal pot of swamp brew. It's a mix of mushrooms, frog meat, slime, and possibly insects you'd rather not identify. The shamans insist it sharpens the wits. More often, it leaves you squatting in the bushes for hours with a bellyache. After your meal, your day might involve patrolling the swamp paths, checking the traps for stray prey or enemies who wandered in. Kruleboyz prefer the slow game, skirmishes, traps, and guerrilla tactics. They'll let a patrol get deeper and deeper into their territory before springing an ambush. So, your job could involve resetting spike pits, oiling hidden blade mechanisms, or camouflaging tripwires beneath rotting vines. And if you don't do it well, the swamp has ways of reminding you. Sometimes with a sudden swamp bog collapse that swallows you up to the waist in sticky sludge crawling with razor-toothed swamp eels. Your bosses, the bosses of the tribe, rule by fear and cunning. They're the biggest, meanest Kruleboyz, but also the cleverest. They have a terrifying knack for spotting weakness, and if you seem lazy, stupid, or disloyal, you might wake up one night tied up as bait for a Maya Drake. Speaking of bosses, there's always one eyeing the next rank up the ladder. Infighting isn't just common, it's expected. Alliances shift faster than the swamp waters. One day you're best mates with the lad next to you. The next day he's whispering to the boss that you've been pocketing extra loot or disrespecting Mork. And Mork, he's the god whose cunning defines your entire existence. Gork is the brutal side, Mork the clever side. The Kruleboyz say Mork appreciates trickery, traps, and clever plans. So, it's a badge of honor to outsmart your rivals. But it also makes the entire tribe a nest of vipers waiting to bite one another. Now, let's talk about gear. Kruleboyz don't go in for fancy, shining armor. It's all about dirty leathers, rusted metal plates, and cloaks soaked in swamp water to blend into the shadows. Weapons are wickedly curved blades, serrated edges, and barbs designed not merely to kill, but to cause the most agonizing wounds possible. For you as a Kruleboy, a good day is one where you get to stay hidden, fire off a bolt from your crossbow, and watch an enemy stagger and die without ever knowing you were there. A bad day? You're caught in the open, facing a Stormcast Eternal with a lightning-charged hammer, and suddenly realize that all your clever tricks can't save you from being flattened like a swamp toad. Rites and rituals are another part of daily life. The Swamp Kala shamans constantly brew their potions and poisons. They claim to talk to swamp spirits and conjure protective charms. The tribe's superstitious belief in omens dictates everything from the timing of an ambush to which unlucky git has to walk point on patrol. If a swamp frog croaks wrong, the whole warband might turn around and trudge back to the fort, convinced it's a bad day to fight. The shamans hold enormous power because they alone can interpret these signs. And they're as feared as they are respected. Nobody wants to wake up with a frog's tongue nailed to their door as a curse. Even celebrations are weird and dangerous. Victory feasts often involve wrestling squigs or tossing live frogs into each other's stew. Songs are croaked out in guttural voices, and the rhythm is kept by banging on shields or sloshing swamp water in buckets. And if the boss is feeling generous, you might even get a chunk of the spoils, so long as you survive the backstabbing over who gets the biggest share. But for all the hardship, Kruleboyz have a sort of pride. They're survivors. In a realm filled with monsters, gods, and magical cataclysms, they live by their wits. They know they'll never be as big as an Ironjaw Orruk or as heavily armored as a Stormcast, but they're okay with that. Because when the big brutes clash in the open, it's the Kruleboyz slinking around the flanks, cutting down stragglers, poisoning water supplies, and snatching away victory when nobody's looking. It's a dangerous, thankless life, but it's theirs. And if you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd have to embrace that reality. You'd live in constant tension, surrounded by treachery, knee-deep in swamp muck, always listening for the rustle of a bigger predator or the whisper of your mate plotting to stick a blade in your back. But at least you'd know one thing. In the mortal realms, no one does, sneaky and vicious, quite like the Kruleboyz. Still, let's not pretend you'd have any grand destiny if you were born a Kruleboy. The likelihood is that you'll never become a boss, or even a notable champion. The odds are stacked against you from day one. Survival, not glory, is the name of the game. Your tribe might reside deep in the Ghurish swamps, the realm of beasts. It's a place teeming with life so violent and predatory that even the trees can try to eat you. The humidity is oppressive, the stench of decay constant. Imagine wading through waist-deep muck, eyes peeled for snapping reptilian jaws beneath the surface. The geography dictates the Kruleboyz' tactics and lifestyle. They're masters of camouflage, making use of mist, shadows, and swamp flora to stay hidden. Every path is lined with hidden stakes, barbed nets, and pits lined with venomous stakes. It's ingenious, yet also means you live in perpetual fear of stumbling into your own traps. The realm itself shapes their worldview. Ghur is a land of predators. It's not enough to be strong, you must be cunning. The Kruleboyz idolize Mork precisely because he embodies this blend of viciousness and trickery. But their cunning has a dark side, feeding a culture of backstabbing, secrecy, and ruthless ambition. So let's say you survived to adolescence. You're bigger now, stronger, but still lean and wiry rather than hulking. Your first taste of war might be as part of a skulk mob small Kruleboy groups that slip ahead of the main force to scout enemy positions. Your boss might grunt at you, "Go see what Darhumes is doing, come back alive," or "Don't bother coming back," and you'd better be quiet about it. Kruleboyz who make noise or leave tracks tend to get an arrow in the neck. Not always from the enemy either. A boss doesn't want failures spoiling the tribe's reputation for sneakiness. The tribe's economy revolves around looting, plunder, and extortion. Kruleboyz rarely engage in straightforward conquest. Instead, they raid villages, poison water supplies, or burn crops, then slink away before a counterattack. They demand tribute from terrified locals in the form of food, shiny trinkets, or slaves. If a settlement refuses, the Kruleboyz might drop a dead, bloated swamp creature into their well, or leave venomous squigs in the town square as a warning. Artistry for a Kruleboy isn't painting or sculpture, it's the perfect ambush, the cleverest trap, or the deadliest poison. Swamp Kala shamans experiment constantly, brewing new toxins or potions. Some are designed to paralyze enemies, others eat away flesh or send visions of monstrous swamp beasts clawing at your mind. Of course, Testing these concoctions means some unlucky git might end up foaming at the mouth and twitching in the mud. It's all part of progress, they say. Their alliances are as murky as the waters they dwell in. The Kruleboyz nominally serve Kragnos, the end of empires, the towering beast god of earthquakes and ruin. Yet loyalty is an optional thing in the swamp. They'll swear allegiance one moment and vanish into the mist the next. Even within Destruction's broader alliance, the Kruleboyz are viewed with suspicion. The Ironjaws think they're sneaks and cowards for avoiding a good brawl. Grots see them as terrifying older cousins who might shove them into a frog pond for fun. Troggoths, massive, regenerating brutes, sometimes ally with them, drawn by the promise of food or shiny objects. But even Troggoths get uneasy around all the slithering poisons and whispered secrets. And you, poor Kruleboy, exist at the bottom of this pecking order. Your life is ruled by fear. Fear of your enemies, fear of your bosses, fear of the swamp itself. Even your weapons feel as though they're designed more for cruelty than practicality. Barbed spears, jagged cleavers, and bolt throwers loaded with poison-tipped darts. Everything is about inflicting pain, sowing terror, and leaving survivors to spread tales of your tribe's monstrous cunning. But there's a certain twisted pride in it all. Kruleboyz know that without them, the destruction forces would lack subtlety. They're the knife in the dark, the trap beneath the leaves, the whisper of doom. Their magic, though crude by some standards, can cripple an enemy army before the first clash of steel. The problem is, being born as one of them, you'd never know peace. You'd spend every day covered in grime, watching your back and dreaming of a bigger share of the loot. And the truth is, unless you're exceptionally cunning or extremely lucky, you're more likely to end up impaled on a stormcast spear than commanding your own warband. So if you woke up one morning as a Kruleboy, squinting through the swamp mist, feeling your belly churn with bad fungus stew, and hearing the distant roar of approaching enemies, you'd probably wish you'd stayed human. Because in the mortal realms, few lives are as nasty, brutish, and short as that of a Kruleboy. Let's talk about the everyday details that come with your new life as a Kruleboy. First off, food. It's variable. The swamps of Ghur offer plenty to eat if you're not picky and don't mind potentially dying in agony. A big part of being a Kruleboy is learning what you can safely swallow and what will leave you curled up in the mud spewing green vomit. There's fish with razor scales, grubs the size of a man's thumb, and mushrooms that glow faintly in the dark. Some Kruleboyz swear these glow shrooms taste amazing and give you visions of Mork's cunning plans. Others end up foaming at the mouth. It's a gamble. Then there's swamp meat. Reptiles, amphibians, and swamp beasts of every shape and size roam these waters. A successful hunt can feed your tribe for days, but even then, you have to watch out. Many creatures in Ghur are filled with toxins. Some predators have blood so acidic, it'll melt your teeth if you bite down too hard. So your tribe's swamp Kala shamans double as chefs, chanting strange incantations while boiling lumps of mystery meat until they're probably safe. If you were hoping for clean water, forget it. Every drop in the swamp is tinged with silt and who knows what else. Many Kruleboyz develop a permanent wheeze from breathing swamp vapors. A cough that rattles in your chest becomes a part of everyday life. Shelter is another concern. Kruleboyz don't build towering fortresses like Chaos warbands or carve grand halls like Duardin. Instead, they construct ramshackle villages perched on stilts above the swampy ground. Narrow plank bridges connect these elevated huts, each swaying alarmingly in the breeze. Beneath the walkways lie murky waters teeming with snapping beasts. Inside the huts, the air is thick with smoke from cooking fires and the reek of tanned hides drying overhead. Every surface drips with swamp moisture. Bugs the size of your hand crawl across the rafters, and thick strands of moss hang like curtains from the ceiling. Despite the squalor, Kruleboyz have an artistry to their architecture. They carve grotesque masks into wooden beams, decorate walls with bones and trophies, and hang fetishes designed to ward off hostile spirits or simply frighten trespassers. Let's not forget about grooming. Spoiler, there isn't much. Kruleboyz rarely bother washing. Swamp water's as likely to be full of parasites as anything else. Hair becomes matted, teeth go brown from chewing swampweed, fingernails collect grime and stay that way. It's a life of filth and stench. But that's how Kruleboyz like it. The swamp stink is their camouflage. They move through reeds and mud with barely a ripple. If an enemy catches a whiff of something foul, they're likely to blame the swamp until a spear slides between their ribs. Socially, life as a Kruleboy is tense. You'd better keep your eyes lowered around your boss. Kruleboyz respect cunning above brute strength, but even the smartest boss won't hesitate to make an example of a troublemaker. A stray insult, a rumor of betrayal, or failing to bring back enough loot can earn you a brutal beating, or worse. And watch your back among your peers. Rivalries are constant. One Kruleboy might covet your weapon, your shiny trophy, or your place in the boss's regard. Knives come out in the dark. So do poisoned darts. Trust is rare. Even friendships have sharp edges. Now imagine the spiritual side of your new life. Kruleboyz believe the swamp itself holds secrets, hiding monstrous things that watch from the reeds. Shamans commune with these forces, whispering to spirits that may or may not exist. Rituals are frequent, involving chanting, drums, and the sacrifice of unlucky squigs or other swamp creatures. The goal is simple: gain favor, protect the tribe, and strike terror into the hearts of enemies. Kruleboyz also worship Mork, the cunning aspect of the twin-headed orc, god Gorkamorka. They see him as the ultimate trickster, a god who revels in clever traps and dirty tricks. Mork's approval is everything. Kruleboyz believe that outwitting an enemy is a sacred act, almost a form of worship. Of course, this devotion has its downsides. A boss eager to please Mork might order increasingly elaborate schemes, some so complicated they collapse under their own weight. And guess who will be blamed if things go wrong? You. Then there's war. Kruleboyz don't fight like Ironjaws. No roaring charges, no smashing lines of steel. Instead, they prefer ambushes, traps, and sudden strikes. Their armies might lie hidden for hours, even days, waiting for the perfect moment. Imagine crouching in a muddy ditch, insects crawling over your skin, barely daring to breathe while your boss signals for silence. And then, in an instant, the Kruleboyz unleash a storm of poisoned darts, nets, and whirring blades. Panic erupts among the enemy ranks, and your tribe descends like a pack of swamp reptiles. Sometimes, though, the plan goes wrong. A breeze shifts, revealing your hiding place. A monstrous beast rampages through your carefully laid traps, or your own shaman accidentally releases a cloud of poisonous mist that engulfs your lines instead of the enemies. The result? Chaos, confusion, and probably a lot of screaming. Yet this is the Kruleboy way. Survival depends on never fighting fair. It's about striking where the enemy is weakest, terrifying them into flight, and ensuring the tribe emerges victorious with minimal casualties. Well, minimal casualties on your side. But despite all the cunning, cruelty, and traps, there's one unescapable truth. If you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd be living in a realm where everything wants to kill you. From predators in the swamp to rival warbands to the Stormcast Eternals themselves, your life would be a perpetual game of survival. And even if you did survive, you'd still probably stink of swamp water, carry weeping sores from insect bites, and be haunted by the knowledge that somewhere in the mist, something even more dangerous is waiting for you. So yeah. Let's talk more deeply about where you'd actually be waking up if you were born a Kruleboy. Because geography is fate in the mortal realms, and your fate as a Kruleboy is swampy, damp, and very, very grim. Most Kruleboyz hail from Ghur, the realm of beasts. That alone should tell you plenty. Ghur is a place where the land itself is alive with hunger, where even the trees can snap their roots like whips and rivers shift course overnight. Everything in Ghur is trying to eat something else, and nothing stays small for long. Endless stretches of dark water choked with lily pads the size of wagon wheels. Rust-colored reeds wave overhead like spears. Clouds of biting insects drift through the air so thick they look like fog. The mud bubbles as gas seeps up from decaying vegetation below. And hidden just beneath the water's surface are creatures with eyes that glow like green coals, waiting for something warm-blooded to step too close. As a Kruleboy, this is your natural home. You know every inch of these wetlands, the safe paths across the shallows, which pools hide lurking swamp serpents, and which plants can be chewed for a quick burst of energy or used to poison an enemy's stew. You'd learn to walk softly on planks laid across marshy ground, ears pricked for the faintest ripple that might warn of an approaching monster or an enemy warband. Kruleboyz thrive in places where others wouldn't dare tread. It's part of why they've become so feared across Ghur. Their villages are hidden among towering cattails and veiled in perpetual mist. Anyone trying to assault a Kruleboy settlement ends up sucked into quicksand, devoured by hidden reptiles, or caught in a net and peppered with poison darts. But the downside is, you live there too. The swamp is home, but it's also a predator. Every day you wake up wondering if your hut will still be there, or if it's sunk half a meter deeper into the mud overnight. You worry whether your next step will land you ankle deep in water or in the jaws of a bog snapper that's been lurking motionless for hours. And then there's the climate. It rains nearly every day. Thunder rumbles like distant war drums. Lightning crackles through the clouds, sending brilliant flashes that momentarily reveal enormous beasts moving in the distance. Sometimes the swamp itself seems to breathe. Mist rolling in like a living thing, muffling all sound except for the constant drips and croaks. It's an oppressive, isolating existence. The swamp cuts you off from the world, trapping you in a damp maze. But it's also the perfect hiding place for an army of backstabbers. Now let's talk politics. Because even in this soggy hellscape, the Kruleboyz have a social structure, and it's one you better learn fast if you wake up as one of them. The boss of a Kruleboy tribe is usually the smartest, most ruthless, and most cunning individual around. Size matters less than brains. A cunning trick is worth more than a dozen brawny lads swinging clubs. The tribe respects devious plans, clever traps, and good timing, but remember, being boss doesn't mean you're safe. The moment a boss shows weakness, a rival might step up to challenge them. Poison, assassination, mysterious accidents, all are perfectly valid routes to promotion. Below the boss are trusted lieutenants. These might be killer bosses, hulking brutes in jagged armor, or swamp Kala shamans muttering secrets into their bone-carved masks. These figures enforce the boss's will and keep the rank and file in line. As a regular Kruleboy, your job is to follow orders, keep your mouth shut, and stay out of trouble. Success is measured in loot stolen, traps well laid, and enemies terrified. If you show a spark of cunning, you might earn the boss's attention, which could be a good thing, or a very, very bad thing if your cleverness makes you a threat. Among Kruleboyz, suspicion is currency. Everyone's always scheming. Rumors are weapons, and respect is only granted if you've proven you can outwit your rivals, or if you've gathered enough underlings to protect you from being stabbed in your sleep. Spiritual life in a Kruleboy tribe revolves around Mork, the cunning, mean-spirited aspect of Gorka. Kruleboyz see Mork as the ultimate trickster, the god who delights in making fools of stronger foes. This shapes their entire worldview. They believe the best fight is one you've already won before it starts. So, if you wake up as a Kruleboy, your prayers and rituals won't be about honor or valor. Instead, they'll be pleas for stealth, guile, and the perfect moment to strike. Swamp Kala shamans conduct strange rites with bubbling cauldrons and clouds of greenish gas, calling on Mork for visions of traps, ambushes, and poison recipes. The Kruleboyz are masters of alchemy, distilling toxic brews from swamp plants and venomous creatures. These poisons coat spear tips, darts, and arrows, causing agonizing wounds that can bring down even mighty warriors. But it's not just the enemy who risks poisoning. A careless Kruleboy might spill a flask on himself, or mix the wrong ingredients and unleash choking clouds that kill half a camp. The swamp's ingredients are fickle, and so are the results. yet poisons are essential. Kruleboyz know they can't win in a straight-up fight against heavy-armored Stormcast Eternals or towering monsters. Instead, they soften their enemies up with toxins, weaken them from the shadows, and strike when their foes are too sick or disoriented to resist. This is why Kruleboyz love traps. Nets, spikes, pits disguised with moss. Anything to confuse, injure, or frighten. Entire warbands have been routed without ever seeing who attacked them. If you're a Kruleboy, you'll spend a lot of time preparing these traps, digging pits in mud, sharpening stakes, braiding nets, and all the while trying not to blunder into your own handiwork. It's a life that demands patience, caution, and the willingness to wait for the perfect moment. Hours, days, even weeks might pass before a Kruleboy warband strikes. So yes, waking up as a Kruleboy means living a life of endless mud, suspicion, and mosquito bites, all while constantly scanning the shadows for something trying to eat you. But for the Kruleboyz, that's just life in the swamp. Let's talk about what happens when the Kruleboyz go to war. Because if you woke up as a Kruleboy, there's one truth you'd learn fast. Your life will almost certainly involve a lot of fighting, but not the glorious, cinematic kind you might imagine. See? Kruleboyz don't march in shining ranks, banging drums and roaring challenges at their enemies, and they're not about honor duels or head-on clashes. Instead, they slither through reeds and marsh grass, creeping closer under cover of darkness until they're close enough to strike from hiding. Picture it, you're crouched in knee-deep swamp water, leeches biting your ankles, while insects drone around your ears. You've been there for hours, sometimes days, waiting for the signal. Your boss whispers plans about how the enemy will never see you coming. Meanwhile, your back's aching, your armor's slimy with algae, and you keep imagining giant swamp snakes lurking under the surface. Then the attack comes, explosions of swamp gas, poisoned arrows whistling through the dark, hidden traps springing to life. Enemies stumbling in confusion as nets drop over them or spikes burst from the mud. The Kruleboyz rush forward, stabbing and hacking, cackling with glee as foes fall to the ground, retching from toxins. It's chaos. But a chaos guided by ruthless cunning. Kruleboyz rarely commit their full force unless victory is certain. If things look bad, they melt away into the mist, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. And if you're a Kruleboy, you'll be right there with them, because staying behind is a good way to end up as someone's trophy. This preference for ambush and retreat shapes how Kruleboyz arm themselves. Their weapons tend to be long and cruelly barbed, perfect for striking from just outside an enemy's reach. They carry wicked spears, jagged cleavers, and blowpipes loaded with poisoned darts. Even their shields are often spiked, turning a defensive block into an offensive weapon. Armor is a patchwork affair. Some Kruleboyz wear plates of beaten iron, scavenged from defeated enemies. Others go lighter, choosing mobility over protection. A heavy breastplate might save your life, sure, but it also makes it harder to sneak through reeds or slip away when things go wrong. Then there are the monsters, because as a Kruleboy you'd find yourself working alongside creatures as strange as the swamp itself. Take the Sludgeraker beast, a giant, toad-like reptile dripping with venom and festooned with barbed hooks. It's led into battle by a swamp boss, towering atop its back, using a cruel goad to steer the beast forward. The Sludgeraker's massive tongue can lash out to snatch an enemy right off the ground. It's a terrifying sight, unless you're the one having to clean up after it between battles. Or the Hogrot Slittaz, squat, wily goblinoids who serve as mercenaries for the Kruleboyz. They're skilled bomb makers and sly negotiators, happy to join the Kruleboyz for the right price. But they're also treacherous little gits who might vanish with your loot if you're not careful. As a Kruleboy, you'd have to keep a close eye on any Hogrot in your camp. Kruleboyz also employ endless varieties of traps, war engines, and bizarre contraptions. Swamp Color shamans might unleash clouds of noxious gas. Engineers might rig unstable explosives. You'd be expected to help maintain these things, or at least to know when it's smart to keep your distance. And it's worth remembering, the swamp itself is always part of your army. Kruleboyz fight best on their own turf, where they know every channel, every hidden hollow, every patch of treacherous ground. They'll lure enemies deeper and deeper into the wetlands, where massive reptiles lurk just beneath the surface, and where entire units can disappear into quicksand without a trace. But imagine being the guy laying those traps. You're slogging through thigh-deep muck with stakes and nets strapped to your back. The stench of rotting vegetation hangs in the air. Something brushes your leg under the water, and you've still got hours of work ahead of you before you can crawl back to camp. War for a Kruleboy isn't just about fighting. It's about patience, planning, and knowing exactly when to strike. The ideal Kruleboy battle ends with your enemies routed, your tribe cackling over loot, and as few of your own lads dead as possible. If you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd discover quickly that caution isn't cowardice, it's survival. And anyone who forgets that lesson doesn't stay alive long. Now, let's talk about society. Because Kruleboys have a culture all their own, and it's one that might not appeal if you've grown up with concepts like personal space or privacy. Kruleboy settlements are ramshackle affairs built on stilts over swampy ground. Platforms of wooden planks crisscross through the village like spiderwebs. Tattered banners hang from poles. Bone charms and fetishes clatter in the breeze. Noise is constant, croaking frogs, chirping insects, the occasional shriek of some predator dragging off a careless goblin. And always the thick, damp smell of swamp gas. Inside the huts there's little comfort. Bedding is straw soaked with swamp water. Food is a stew of fish, frogs, swamp tubers, and occasionally things better left unidentified. Fires are kept low to avoid drawing attention from aerial predators or enemy scouts. There's no privacy. Secrets are currency in Kruleboy culture, and walls have ears. You'd learn quickly to keep your thoughts to yourself, lest someone decide your ambitions need pruning. Kruleboys might be cunning, but they're not subtle about displays of power. A big boss will decorate his hut with trophies, enemy helmets, monster skulls, shiny baubles looted from Stormcast Eternals. The more gruesome the display, the higher the status. And every tribe has its own weird customs. Some might insist on ritual duels to settle disputes. Others hold night-long storytelling sessions where shamans recount tales of Mork's greatest tricks. Still others practice elaborate camouflage dances, believing Mork watches from the shadows, judging whose moves are cunning enough to win his favor. It's a society held together by cunning, fear, and mutual suspicion. Which means, if you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd better watch your back, and everyone else's too. And then there's the question of leadership. Because as a Kruleboy, you'd quickly learn that while brute strength has its place, true power belongs to those with the sharpest wits and the nastiest tricks. Kruleboy bosses are masters of manipulation. They're constantly scheming, weighing loyalties, and sniffing out any potential threats to their authority. A boss who rules through pure fear won't last long, because someone cleverer will eventually set an accident in motion, perhaps a falling log trap, a dose of poison, or a sudden ambush in the dark. So, imagine you're a rising Kruleboy warrior, earning respect for your clever ambushes or for laying particularly nasty traps. You'd be under constant watch. Your boss might praise you one day, then try to eliminate you the next. At higher levels, true power belongs to the Swampkala shamans. These eerie figures wield potent swamp magic, brewing toxic concoctions and calling on the murky spirits of the wetlands. They're respected, feared, and sometimes deeply distrusted. If you're unlucky enough to be chosen as a shaman's apprentice, your days will be filled with gathering foul ingredients, leeches, swamp fungus, venomous insects, and performing dangerous rituals. One wrong move, and you're just another bubbling stain at the bottom of a cauldron. But shamans hold sway because their power is undeniable. They can curse enemy heroes, cloak Kruleboyz in illusions, or unleash clouds of poisonous mists. Many bosses defer to them, either out of genuine fear or simple superstition. Now, let's talk faith. Because while Kruleboyz are practical creatures, they're also deeply superstitious. Their devotion centers on Mork, or sometimes Gork, depending on whom you ask. To a Kruleboy, Mork is the epitome of cunning brutality, the god who loves a well-laid trap and a perfectly executed ambush. Every Kruleboy believes Mork watches from the shadows, judging each trick for cleverness. This belief shapes everything from tactics to daily life. When setting traps, Kruleboyz often leave small offerings, a polished bone, a feather, a splash of swamp water. Before raids, shamans lead prayers, asking Mork for guidance on how best to sow terror and confusion. If you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd quickly learn there's no escaping Mork's gaze. Every misstep is blamed on his displeasure. A broken spear, a snakebite, a sudden downpour that ruins an ambush. These are all signs you've offended the god of tricks, and you better find a way to appease him. Of course, religious fervor doesn't mean kindness. Kruleboyz don't hold moral qualms about sacrificing a few hobgrots, or even fellow Orruks, if they think it'll earn Mork's favor. You'd want to stay well out of the way during any religious ceremony that involves choosing volunteers. Speaking of hobgrots, let's circle back to those little weasels. Hobgrots are the Kruleboyz' uneasy partners. They're smaller, sneakier, and shockingly good with explosives and black powder. Unlike Orruks, they care less about personal glory and more about turning a tidy profit. They'll fight alongside Kruleboyz, handle dangerous jobs like bomb making, and help arrange shady deals. But they're also prone to sudden betrayals. More than one Kruleboy warband has returned from a successful raid only to discover the hobgrots vanished overnight along with half the loot. As a Kruleboy, you'd spend a lot of time eyeing hobgrots suspiciously, trying to decide whether they're helping you or plotting to stab you in the back. Now let's talk about the environment. Because the mortal realms are vast, but Kruleboyz have definite preferences for where they settle. Most commonly, they thrive in the swamps and marshes of Ghur, the realm of beasts. Ghur's endless wetlands are perfect for hiding ambushes, raising monstrous reptiles, and brewing foul concoctions. Thick mists, towering reeds, and endless mud make it nearly impossible for outsiders to navigate without getting hopelessly lost or eaten. But Kruleboyz aren't strictly tied to Ghur. They've been sighted in the marshes of Ghyran, the realm of life, where lush vegetation and poisonous flora provide ideal camouflage. They've even ventured into Shamon, the realm of metal, establishing settlements in tarnished floodplains where metallic sludge flows like rivers. Wherever they go, the key factor is terrain. Kruleboyz want territory that's hard to invade, easy to hide in, and filled with hazards they can exploit. You'd never find a Kruleboy fortress perched proudly atop a hill. Instead, they'll build platforms over bogs, burrow into wet caves, or weave their lairs into dense thickets of mangrove roots. And while this environment serves them well, it's also a constant danger. As a Kruleboy, you'd be on perpetual guard against predators, from giant serpents to carnivorous frogs capable of swallowing an Orruk whole. Diseases run rampant in the stagnant waters. Flesh-eating bacteria, parasitic insects, and venomous spores are daily threats. Even the weather is against you. Monsoon rains can drown entire camps overnight. Swamp gas can ignite into firestorms. You'd be sleeping with one eye open if you dared to sleep at all. Still, for all these hazards, there's a certain grim pride in being a Kruleboy. They know they're feared and misunderstood. They delight in being the monsters lurking in the mist, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd be forced to accept that the rest of the mortal realms see you as sneaky, vile, and dishonorable. And to the Kruleboyz, that's the whole point. Because in a world of giants, dragons, and armored demigods, there's something deliciously satisfying about knowing you're the predator that none of them see coming. And let's not forget about the tools of the trade. Because if you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd quickly realize your entire existence revolves around your kit, your weapons, your traps, your poisons. First, the weapons. Kruleboyz favor long, wicked spears. They're not made just for stabbing, they're designed for maximum pain. Kruleboyz coat spear tips in toxins that fester inside wounds, causing agony and weakening enemies over time. If you thought getting run through with a spear was bad enough, imagine the aftermath. Your veins burn, your skin blisters, and you're too sick to even lift a shield. As a Kruleboy, you'd learn to love that sight. Because your enemy's suffering isn't just satisfying, it's strategic. Then there's the slitter. These cruelly curved knives are perfect for close work. Slitters slip between armor plates and slice tendons or arteries. They're light enough to flick from a hidden sheath. And Kruleboyz love hidden sheaths. And don't overlook the crossbows. Kruleboyz craft enormous crossbows, some so big they rest on tripods. They fire jagged bolts laced with venom. The bolts don't just pierce flesh, they tear it, hooking into muscles and pulling loose. You'd also spend a lot of time learning to tie knots and rig tripwires. A Kruleboy's true arsenal is his traps. Think concealed pits lined with stakes, tree trunk deadfalls waiting to crush intruders, snares that yank prey skyward, or cleverly positioned logs rigged to swing down like battering rams. Even swamp gas is a weapon. Shamans might waft noxious clouds over enemy formations, leaving them gagging and blind. Or they'll brew potions that cause hallucinations, sending foes fleeing from phantom monsters. As a Kruleboy, you quickly learn the single golden rule: always be ready to cheat. Honor is a foreign concept. Winning is the only goal, and preferably without the enemy even knowing you were there. A perfect Kruleboy victory leaves the enemy dead and terrified, wondering what invisible terror wiped them out. And that's another reason why it'd be miserable waking up as a Kruleboy. You'd always have to think before you act. Unlike Ironjaws, who simply roar into battle, you'd need to analyze terrain, guess enemy movements, and pick the best place to lay your traps. You'd be forced to memorize which mushrooms create hallucinations, which swamp bugs make the best poison, and which vines can support a snare. Failure isn't just embarrassing, it's fatal. A badly placed trap could kill your own kin, or worse, lead you exposed to a counterattack. And no one forgives a Kruleboy who messes up. Even in triumph, there's no peace, because every Kruleboy knows that victory makes you a target for jealousy. If you become too good, your own boss might decide you're a threat and arrange an accident. The hierarchy among Kruleboyz is a constant dance of suspicion. Lieutenants quietly spy on bosses, shamans whisper secrets, hobgrots pass information to whoever pays the best. Betrayal is simply another tactic, and this relentless paranoia wears on you. Imagine living every day knowing your own allies might be plotting your downfall. You'd be forced to sleep lightly, booby-trap your tent, and test your food for poison. Still, for all this treachery, Kruleboyz share an odd sort of loyalty. They're united by a common worldview that life is short, dangerous, and best survived through cunning. They respect cleverness, and they take pride in being feared and misunderstood. A Kruleboy sees himself as a predator among prey. Even if the world hates him, he knows he's smarter than the brutes who charge straight into battle. Now let's talk about battles. Because if you woke up as a Kruleboy, warfare would become your entire purpose. Kruleboyz never fight fair. They don't charge across open fields unless forced. Instead, they choose terrain filled with obstacles, swamps, forests, ruined cities, anywhere they can strike unseen. They launch sudden missile barrages, luring enemies into hidden kill zones. Shamans create magical fog to sow confusion. Kruleboyz separate enemy units, surround them, and cut them down piece by piece. One of their favorite tricks is the false retreat. A Kruleboy force will feign panic and run, drawing pursuers into marshes where they bog down and become easy targets. And the psychological warfare is relentless. Kruleboyz will hang flayed skins from trees, leave trails of blood to nowhere, or set up grotesque effigies to terrify foes. Their entire approach to war is based on fear. To a Kruleboy, the ultimate victory isn't just killing an enemy, it's breaking them so completely that they flee in terror or surrender without a fight. And if you think that's excessive, remember, this is how Kruleboyz survive in a world filled with monsters, stormcast eternals, and daemonic horrors. Subterfuge is their only advantage. But war isn't just about winning battles, it's also about gathering loot. Kruleboyz love plunder, especially rare metals, weapons, and prisoners who can be ransomed or experimented on. Raiding is a way of life. Small warbands creep across borders, snatching resources and slipping away before any retaliation. If you were a Kruleboy, you'd likely spend more time plotting raids than actually fighting. Between raids, life in the camp is tense. Arguments break out over loot shares, grudges simmer. And above it all, the shamans mutter cryptic warnings, stirring cauldrons that hiss and bubble ominously. If you're the unlucky Kruleboy tasked with fetching ingredients for a ritual, prepare to wrestle swamp serpents, dodge flesh-eating insects, and brave poisonous pools, all while avoiding rival gangs looking to steal your prize. For all their cunning, Kruleboyz are not immune to superstition. Bad omens. A sudden flock of crows, a swirling mist can send entire warbands packing, abandoning perfectly good camps for fear that Mork is displeased. Superstition even influences leadership. A boss might be dethroned if his followers decide he's cursed, and there's nothing a Kruleboy fears more than bad luck. Yet despite their fear and paranoia, Kruleboyz keep fighting, because they believe every new scheme, every new trap might finally earn them the ultimate victory, or at least a few weeks of peace and stolen riches. And that's the reality of waking up as a Kruleboy. You'd be clever, ruthless, and perpetually watching your back. You'd live in stinking swamps, breathe poisonous mists, and constantly sharpen your blades. But you'd also know that, for all the realm's giants and dragons, you are the monster in the shadows, the terror they whisper about. And to a Kruleboy, that's worth every drop of slime and every sleepless night. If you woke up as a Kruleboy, you'd also have to get used to living in close quarters with some very strange company. See, Kruleboyz rarely operate alone. They're part of vast war clans that include a mix of Orruks, grots, hobgrots, and even monstrous beasts like marsh-dwelling reptiles or swamp dragons. Let's start with the hobgrots. These sneaky, rat-faced creatures serve as middlemen and merchants, trading stolen goods and acting as go-betweens with other factions, particularly the forces of chaos, like the Duardin of the Disciples of Tzeentch, or even Skaven clans. Hobgrots are small, cunning, and absolutely untrustworthy. They carry coin pouches jangling with bribes, know all the rumors, and have a talent for double dealing. If you were a Kruleboy, you'd have to keep one eye on the enemy and the other on your ally Hobgrot, who might sell you out for a handful of silver. But Hobgrots are also valuable. They handle delicate negotiations, slip into enemy camps disguised as traders, and return with priceless intelligence. So even though Kruleboyz despise them, they tolerate them for a while. Then, there are the Swamp Kala Shamans. These twisted Orruks wield a blend of natural toxins and raw Ghurish magic. Their brews can heal or kill, and their visions shape the war clan's fate. Kruleboyz worship Swamp Kalas, but fear them deeply. Shamans claim to hear Mork's voice in the bubbling of their cauldrons. Their cryptic pronouncements can doom an entire warband or elevate a lowly warrior to power. Being born a Kruleboy means you'd spend your days hanging on a shaman's every word, desperately hoping he's not muttering your name into the swamp gas. Kruleboyz believe the swamps themselves whisper secrets to the shamans, guiding them to traps, revealing enemy weaknesses, or warning of betrayal. The problem is, sometimes the swamp lies. Nothing's ever certain in a Kruleboy's life. You'd live in a haze of suspicion, desperately interpreting signs. A swirl in the mud, the call of a frog to decide whether to attack or retreat. Then there's the matter of beasts. Kruleboyz have a unique bond with monstrous creatures like the Court's Ripper Vultures or the Sludgeraker beasts. Imagine waking up one morning and being told your job is to ride a massive reptilian monster through a swamp, steering it with a barbed iron bit while it snaps at your leg. Kruleboy beasts are vicious, temperamental, and often as dangerous to their riders as they are to enemies. But they're crucial to the Kruleboy's identity, living symbols of their cunning and ferocity. If you're a Kruleboy, beast wrangling is part of your education. You'd learn how to soothe a Sludgeraker with specific herbs, how to avoid getting tail-whipped into a tree, and how to keep the beast's savage appetite focused on the enemy rather than your fellow warriors. Let's talk about where you'd live. Kruleboyz prefer the treacherous wetlands of Ghur, the realm of beasts. The swamps of Ghur are not charming. They're a quagmire of mud, blood, biting insects, and constant rain. Your home would be a precarious wooden platform above bubbling bogs. Walkways of rope and slick planks connect the huts, and one misstep sends you plunging into leech-infested water. But there's a reason for this choice of home. Swamps offer concealment. The reeds and mists hide Kruleboy movements from prying eyes. Enemies stumble and sink in hidden sinkholes, while Kruleboyz glide silently above on boardwalks they alone know how to navigate. Your diet as a Kruleboy would consist of fish, amphibians, fungi, and swamp creatures. You'd learn to love spicy bog stews flavored with exotic herbs and the occasional unlucky enemy boiled in a cauldron. Even the air is different in Kruleboy territory. It's thick with humidity and rank with the odor of decaying plants and stagnant water. A day without insect bites is a miracle. Life's harsh. Everything's damp. Armor rusts quickly. Weapons must be oiled constantly. Leather molds in hours if left untreated. You'd also have to endure endless patrols through the swamp, probing for intruders or scouting enemy movements. Mosquitoes the size of your thumb would feast on your exposed skin. Crocodilian predators lurk beneath the surface, but the swamp is also home. Kruleboyz know every twist of every trail. They recognize which vines are safe to swing from, which pools hide quicksand, and which hollows conceal lurking monsters. And if you're a Kruleboy, you'd know how to blend into that environment, your mottled skin and tattered gear making you nearly invisible among the shadows and mists. Kruleboyz pride themselves on being underestimated. People think Orruks are all brutes. Kruleboyz delight in proving otherwise, ambushing, poisoning, and dismantling superior forces with guerrilla tactics. Their entire culture celebrates trickery as a virtue. A cunning scheme that crushes a powerful foe is held in higher esteem than brute strength. Of course, if you were born a Kruleboy, that cunning would be both your strength and your curse, because cleverness means responsibility. Your boss might call on you to rig a trap for an advancing Stormcast patrol, or to assassinate a rival in camp. If you succeed, you're praised. If you fail, you're tortured for your secrets or offered as bait in the next ambush. The constant scheming takes a toll. Kruleboyz rarely smile for long. They're always calculating who might betray them, what hidden path to escape by, which ally can be bribed to switch sides. No wonder many Kruleboyz turn grim and suspicious with age, their eyes darting left and right, fingers always twitching near their blades. Yet they remain Orruks. Beneath all the caution lies a primal joy in battle. When their ambush springs shut, Kruleboyz bellow savage war cries, their voices echoing across the swamps. Because at the end of the day, as a Kruleboy, your ultimate truth would be this. You live to strike first, to strike hardest, and to laugh as your enemies flail in poison, pit traps, and fear. And in a world as savage as Ghur, perhaps that's the smartest way to survive. Yet even with all their caution, cunning, and clever plans, being born a Kruleboy means accepting that your life is, statistically speaking, likely to end in several extremely unpleasant ways. Let's be honest, if you're a Kruleboy, your odds of dying peacefully in your sleep are close to zero. Let's explore some of the most probable fates waiting for you in your swampy existence. First and foremost, there's good old-fashioned battlefield death. Kruleboyz love to ambush, but sometimes the enemy fights back. Stormcast Eternals, Caradron Overlords, Sylvaneth. All of them can and will come crashing through your carefully laid traps, weapons blazing, armor shining, and righteous fury burning like a beacon. If you're caught in such a counterattack, your scrawny hide and patchwork armor won't save you. Stormcast hammers will flatten your skull like a ripe swamp melon. Caradron guns will punch holes through your chest big enough to see daylight. Even if you escape the initial fight, wounds fester fast in the swamp's damp air. A small cut from a Sylvaneth blade might rot your flesh until your arm resembles swamp driftwood. Or maybe you'll die by friendly fire. Remember, Kruleboyz love poisons, traps, and sabotage. In the chaos of battle, it's far too easy to stumble into your own pit trap or inhale the deadly fumes of your own Swamp Kala shaman's concoctions. Picture it, you charge heroically into the fray, only to collapse foaming at the mouth because your war mask slipped and you inhaled your own side's miasma bombs. Then there's betrayal. Life among Kruleboyz is a web of plots and shifting loyalties. One day, your mate Grak trusts you to watch his back. The next, he's shoving a dagger between your ribs because the war boss promised him a shinier spear. Ambition is lethal among Kruleboyz. The war boss's position is always under threat. Lieutenants scheme to replace him. Underlings plot to climb the ladder, and ambitious hobgrots whisper sweet promises in powerful ears. If you look too clever, someone may decide you're a threat and remove you preemptively. If you look too weak, someone may stomp you just to prove a point. And don't forget the swamp color shamans. Kruleboyz revere them, but they're also terrified of them. One wrong move, a disrespectful glance, a careless word, and the shaman might mark you for sacrifice to the swamp spirits, or worse, use you as a test subject for a new poison. Imagine waking up tied to a pole while bubbling green liquid is poured down your throat to see what happens. The swamp itself might kill you. The wetlands of Ghur are alive with monstrous predators, razor-toothed reptiles, giant dragonflies the size of wyverns, swarms of blood-sucking insects. Sinkholes swallow entire patrols. Toxic gas pockets explode under your campfires. Carnivorous plants snap shut around unlucky Orruks, dissolving flesh in acidic juices. If you're a Kruleboy, the environment is just as much an enemy as any stormcast. Every day's a gamble whether you'll get eaten, drowned, poisoned, or simply vanish into the marshes. Even success can kill you. Suppose you become a war hero leading an ambush that wipes out a Fireslayer lodge. You might think you're set for life, but glory is dangerous among Kruleboyz. A war boss might view your rising fame as a threat and arrange for you to accidentally fall into a spike pit. Or he might promote you to lead a suicide raid against the heavily fortified Dawnbringer Crusade outpost. No good deed goes unpunished in the swamps. Another risk, magical backlash. Kruleboyz meddle constantly with Ghurish magic, brewing potions and curses. A miscast spell might turn your skin to bark, or cause your bones to stretch until you're twice your height, then shatter like twigs. The realm of Ghur is wild and unpredictable. Magic there pulses with primal savagery. It rewards cunning, but devours mistakes. And should you somehow survive all these hazards, there's always the possibility of being conscripted into some grand wah under Kragnos or Gordrak. These vast invasions sound thrilling, but to a Kruleboy, they're a nightmare. Because in a wah, you'd be shoulder to shoulder with Ironjaws, Bonesplitters, and other Orruks who think your cunning ways are sneaky nonsense. You'd endure endless bullying from hulking Ironjaws bosses who believe subtlety is cowardice. And in the chaos of battle, there's a good chance an Ironjaw accidentally flattens you with a swing meant for the enemy. If you're lucky, your warband might return from a wah, rich with loot and tales of glory. If you're not, your bones are left bleaching in some foreign wasteland while carrion birds pick your flesh. But perhaps the cruelest irony of all, if you die as a Kruleboy, there's a good chance no one remembers you at all. Kruleboyz don't keep careful records of the dead. Names are forgotten, unless you did something truly spectacular, like assassinating a Stormcast Lord Celestant or poisoning an entire Dawnbringer Crusade's water supply. Otherwise, you'll vanish into the swamp, your bones sinking into the mud until even the croaking toads forget you existed. So, waking up as a Kruleboy? It's a life of lurking shadows, hidden knives, venomous schemes, and 1,000 ways to die screaming in the muck. And yet, despite it all, Kruleboyz endure. Because in Ghur's savage lands, cunning is often the only thing keeping you alive. And for a people who thrive on trickery and survival, even a short, brutal life can be one hell of an adventure. And still, despite the sheer misery and danger lurking around every vine-choked tree, there's something darkly exhilarating about being a Kruleboy. Because here's the thing, in a realm ruled by primal beasts and endless war, cunning can be more valuable than brute force. You might not be the biggest or strongest, but if you're clever enough, you can survive and maybe even thrive. Imagine waking up as a Kruleboy and quickly realizing that every moment is a test. You're surrounded by other greenskins who'd slit your throat for your boots, yet you're also part of a culture that reveres slyness and subtlety. That's power, if you can wield it. Your day might start slogging through swamp water up to your chest, scouting for enemies. You'd listen for distant splashes that could be enemy patrols, or just a hungry swamp beast. Either way, you'd keep low, because making noise is a great way to get yourself eaten. If you're lucky enough to be trusted with responsibility, maybe you're leading a small warband. That means making decisions about where to lay traps, how to lure in unsuspecting foes, and when to strike. Maybe you craft a plan to divert an entire Stormcast patrol into a sunken marsh full of quicksand. or set up decoys to draw enemy artillery fire away from your camp. These little victories feel enormous because they're proof that even the smallest Kruleboy can outwit giants. But there's no time to gloat. The moment you start believing you're untouchable is the moment your own mates decide you've gotten too big for your britches. A dagger in the back is a constant occupational hazard. Kruleboyz love their poisons. Imagine crouching in the dark, scraping venom off a swamp serpent's fangs and mixing it into a greasy paste. Apply that to your spearhead, and now even a scratch can send an enemy into agonizing convulsions. Or picture your swamp Kala shaman brewing up a cauldron of fizzing green brew. It smells like sour mushrooms and burning hair. The shaman cackles as he tests it on a bound squig. The squig foams at the mouth and keels over. The shaman gives an approving nod. Success. The next day, you're ordered to splash that brew across enemy defenses. You obey because you've seen what happens to Orruks who say no to a shaman. The swamps themselves shape your entire life. Ghur is a realm of predation and savage hunger. Everything is alive and hunting something else. The land itself shifts unpredictably. Forests rising and falling overnight like living things. Kruleboyz know how to read those changes. You learn to spot the swirl of insects that signals a lurking monster beneath the water. You know which mosses glow when they sense movement and which vines can drag a fully armored warrior under the surface. Life in the swamp means learning patience. You might sit motionless for hours waiting for your prey to draw near. The sounds of buzzing insects and distant croaks become the music of your existence. Sometimes you catch sight of the towering silhouettes of monsters wandering through the mists, colossal creatures of scale and tusk. In those moments, you feel smaller than ever, knowing that even the strongest warboss would be nothing but a snack for such a beast. And yet, despite your fear, there's a savage thrill in being part of Ghur's food chain. You're a predator too, no matter how scrawny. Kruleboyz exist in the murky space between predator and prey. You might be the hunter today, but tomorrow something bigger might be hunting you. That constant tension defines your life. Your kin's society is structured but chaotic. Warbosses hold power through force and fear, but they're expected to be cunning as well. A warboss who relies purely on muscle doesn't last long. His underlings will outwit him eventually. Leadership is fragile. A single lost battle can turn your entire warband against you. One rumor of weakness, and you're gutted in your sleep. The hierarchy beneath the warboss is a mess of shifting alliances. There's no loyalty beyond self-interest. Hobgrots curry favor with gifts and secrets. Swamp Kala shamans wield mystical clout that can protect or doom you. Even within your own tribe, there's constant intrigue. The rumor mill never stops churning. Who's plotting against whom? Which warboss looks vulnerable? Whose cunning scheme will become tomorrow's victory or disaster? And always, there's the Wah! When Gordrak, the Fist of Gork, or Kragnos calls the Orruks to war, all your careful plans go out the window. You're swept up in the tide of green fury, marching alongside Ironjaws and Bonesplitters who have no patience for subtlety. In a Wah! The Kruleboy's skills become both an asset and a liability. Your traps and poisons can break enemy lines, but your own allies might accidentally charge straight through your ambushes, spoiling your plans and flattening you in the process. Surviving a Wah often feels like the ultimate test of Kruleboy cunning. You're not just fighting the enemy, you're trying to survive your own side. And let's not forget the existential dread of living under Ghur's skies. You know that gods and monsters are real. You've seen Stormcast Eternals descend from lightning. You've watched living storms churn the horizon. You've heard tales of Kragnos, the end of empires who can stomp entire cities flat. A Kruleboy knows that even his best laid plans can be obliterated in an instant by forces beyond mortal comprehension. So why do Kruleboyz keep going? Because there's a grim joy in defiance. Because every day you survive is proof that cunning counts for something. Because in the endless struggle of Ghur, cleverness is your only real weapon. And because, as miserable as it is to be born a Kruleboy, there's an undeniable pride in knowing that even the mighty Stormcast Eternals look over their shoulders for traps when they enter your swamps. It might be a harsh life, it might be short and bloody, But at least it's never boring. Being a Kruleboy, you quickly learn there's no such thing as safety, not even among your own kind. One day, you might be sitting around a sputtering campfire, gnawing on half-cooked swamp eel, swapping tales of cunning ambushes and near misses with monsters. Everyone laughs, slaps each other on the back, and toasts with mugs of foul swamp brew. And then, just like that, your mate beside you keels over, frothing at the mouth, eyes rolling back. Poisoned. Nobody flinches. They just keep drinking. That's life among Kruleboyz. Trust is thin as spider silk. It's a place where insults are delivered with smiles, and where anyone could be plotting to replace you if it means they'll stand one step closer to power, or simply get a bigger portion of loot. Speaking of loot, let's talk about that. Being born a Kruleboy means you're obsessed with shiny stuff. You might not have the heavy plate armor of the Ironjaws, or the ritualistic bone trinkets of the Bone Splitters, but you hoard all the same. Rings, amulets, scraps of silver, weird trinkets looted from fallen cities, you stash them away in hidden corners of the swamp. Not because you plan to spend it wisely, no. It's more like insurance. Shiny loot buys favors, secures alliances, or bribes a shaman not to turn you into a squelching toad for stepping on his ritual circle. Kruleboyz, unlike other Orruks, crave cleverness as much as combat. A good bit of trickery earns you respect. So you'd always be plotting the next scam or snare. You'd carve your territory into the swamp, setting up stakes and warning signs that only your fellow Kruleboyz know how to read. Sometimes, you might even use captured enemy banners to confuse interlopers into thinking they're entering safe ground right before they fall into hidden spike pits or get smothered under nets dripping with venom. And while your traps are lethal, they're also a point of twisted pride. Kruleboyz brag about their deadliest inventions. One swampkin might boast of a tripwire strung low enough to clothesline a charging stormcast. Another might show off a snare that drops a nest of spitting vipers onto unsuspecting heads. Yet even in your craftiness, you're overshadowed by the swamp callous shamans. These wiry, wide-eyed mystics are terrifying in their knowledge of swamp lore. They speak to the land, listen to the sloshing whispers of the bog, and brew potions from ingredients no sane being should touch. If a shaman calls you over, you go. You kneel, even if the muck soaks through your trousers. You pretend to listen as he talks about swamp spirits and portents in the bubbles rising from the mire. You nod and agree, even if you have no clue what he's saying. Because if you don't, you might find yourself waking up tomorrow with your skin peeling off in green sheets, or sprouting fungal growth from your nostrils. The shamans don't just heal wounds or create poisons. They curse, warp, and control the very nature of swamp life. And sometimes they're the only barrier between your tribe and the monsters lurking deeper in Ghur. Ah, yes, the monsters! Let's dwell on that, because it's a huge part of why it would suck to wake up as a Kruleboy. Kruleboyz share Ghur with beasts that shouldn't exist anywhere sane. Enormous serpents with eyes like burning coals. Mosquitoes the size of hounds, their needle-like proboscises piercing steel plate. Or worse still, the creatures that slither under the swamp mud, invisible until the day you feel something wrap around your ankle and yank you under. It's said Kruleboyz sometimes tame these horrors, and that's true to a point. But remember, a beast might fight for you today and devour you tomorrow. Kruleboyz take that gamble because everything in their lives is a gamble. Now, imagine trying to sleep. The swamp never sleeps. It gurgles, croaks, and howls. The fog drifts in so thick you can't see your own hand. Somewhere nearby, something lets out a low, rumbling hiss. You clutch your spear tight, eyes darting at every rustle. Sleep becomes less about resting and more about not letting exhaustion kill you faster than your enemies will. And let's not forget the gods. The cruel laughter of Gorkamorka echoes through your existence. You live in constant awareness that your entire race exists to serve the destructive whims of a pair of twin-headed Orruk deities who revel in violence and mischief. Sometimes, you wonder if Gorkamorka laughs harder at the Kruleboyz than at any other greenskins. After all, you try so hard to be subtle, clever, and sly, and still end up wading through blood and mud alongside the rest of the Wah. Because when the drums pound, even the most cunning Kruleboy is swept up in the roaring green tide. All the carefully laid traps, all the poisons and plans, sometimes vanish in an instant under the iron-shod boots of charging iron jaws, or the screaming rush of bone splitters painted with blood. In those moments, you might wonder why you bother. But the truth is, being a Kruleboy is about carving out small victories in a world determined to crush you. It's about finding power where no one expects it, in secrets, in shadows, in the twist of a blade or a whispered word that sends an enemy marching into a trap. So yes, it would be miserable to wake up as a Kruleboy. You'd live in constant fear, surrounded by monsters, poison, betrayal, and unending war. But if you were cunning enough, if you were willing to play the long game, if you could stomach the constant treachery and the ever-present stink of the swamp, you might survive. And if you survived long enough, you might even become the one pulling the strings, while everyone else glances nervously over their shoulders, wondering who's coming for them next. And let's be honest, even if you did manage to claw your way up the ranks as a Kruleboy, the rewards might not be what you'd hope. You might earn a bigger hut, perched precariously above the bog on wooden stilts, lashed together from scavenged planks and half-rotted driftwood. You might get the privilege of ordering lesser lads around, telling them to fetch swamp toads or test new batches of venom, but your bigger hut simply makes you a bigger target. Everyone around you wonders if they could slip poison into your mug, or accidentally push you into the marsh where hungry bog crocs lurk. Promotion among Kruleboyz is like pinning a sign to your back that reads, "Please assassinate me." The environment itself. Ghur is a realm of colossal beasts, shifting lands and predatory magic. The swamps breathe like living creatures. One day your camp is solid ground, the next it's a sinking morass that tries to swallow your squig tents whole. And the weather. Don't get me started. The air can be so thick with buzzing insects that it's like pushing through a curtain of wings and legs. Rains come in sheets so dense they erase the world around you. Lightning flashes illuminate things in the water that you'd rather not see. But you're still expected to patrol the territory, even if the mud comes up to your chest and each step might sink you into a sucking grave. And there's the smell. No matter how high your rank, no matter how clever your traps, you stink. Swamp gas, mold, mildew, and the perpetual reek of wet leather and rotting vegetation cling to you like a second skin. The only creatures that don't mind it are the biting insects and the monsters drawn to the scent of fresh meat. Then there's your place in the grander scheme of the Orruk war machine. Ironjaws see you as scrawny, weedy little gits. They scoff at your poison vials and nets, preferring brute force over your sneaky tricks. Bone splitters think you're cowards because you hide in the reeds instead of charging howling into the enemy's spears. Even your own allies regard you with suspicion, because they know you're always scheming, always calculating how to tip the odds in your favor. But here's the thing, Kruleboyz don't care. Because you're in on a secret, the best way to win a fight is not to fight fair. Why stand toe-to-toe with a Stormcast Eternal if you can lure him into quicksand and watch him sink under the bog bubbles? Why swing a crude blade when a few drops of toxin on the edge will drop your enemy before he ever swings back? And when the "Wah!" roars across Ghur, and Ironjaws stampede forward, and Bone Splitters bellow their savage chants, it's often Kruleboyz who slither behind enemy lines to sabotage supply lines, poison wells, or set cunning traps that cripple entire battalions. The rest of the Orruks might scoff at your methods, but when the battle's over, it's usually your subtlety that made victory possible. Still, it's a harsh life. Your days are filled with the constant drip of swamp water, the buzzing of flies, and the paranoia that your best mate might gut you for your share of loot. Your nights are haunted by the howls of creatures whose shadows loom like towers in the gloom and whose eyes glint just above the waterline. And looming over everything is the reality that one day you'll probably meet your end in a way no one will even remember. Perhaps a venomous swamp beast snaps you up whole. Perhaps one of your own poison darts slicks from your fingers, nicking your skin. Perhaps you're simply crushed beneath a stampede of bigger, meaner Orruks charging into battle. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll vanish into the swamps, never seen again, leaving only rumors behind, because that's the only kind of legend a Kruleboy can hope for, to be whispered about as the one who pulled the ultimate trick and disappeared. It's a rough existence. You'd live each day calculating, second-guessing, keeping one eye over your shoulder. You'd wake up each morning and think, why me? Why'd I have to be born a Kruleboy? And yet, if you were sly enough, cruel enough, and patient enough, well, there's always someone higher up to betray. And the swamp never forgets a cunning plan. So let's say you do manage to survive the beasts, the mud, the treachery, and your own suspicious kin. Let's say you're clever enough to climb the ranks, from lowly bog lurker to beast skewer boss, or even become one of those rare few who command respect from the Ironjaws. Does life finally get better? Not really. Now you've got responsibilities. Other Kruleboyz look to you to lead raids, set traps, and decide when to strike. But if you choose wrong, if your ambush goes sideways, if the loot haul's too small, if too many lads die, the same lads will turn on you faster than a snapping bogfish. Power among Kruleboyz is always balanced on a knife edge. And in a society that reveres cruelty, cunning, and treachery, any sign of weakness is blood in the water. And let's not forget Gobsprak. Gobsprak, the mouth of Mork, is one of the few truly famous Kruleboyz. He rides his monstrous corpse ripper vulture, spewing curses and venom from above. He's cunning, charismatic, and terrifyingly ambitious. But being under Gobsprak's watchful eyes isn't a blessing, it's a curse. If you're a Kruleboy, Gobsprak might call on you for a special job. Maybe it's assassinating a rival boss. Maybe it's sabotaging an Ironjaw's offensive because it's getting too much glory. Maybe it's just fetching some rare swamp fungus from a mire filled with creatures eager to strip your flesh from your bones. Refuse, and Gobsprak might decide you're a liability. Accept, and you are just as likely to succeed as you are to vanish, screaming, into the swamp. And if you become too successful, if you start gathering loyal followers or gaining too much prestige, Gobsprak might start to see you as competition. You'd be amazed how fast a vulture can swoop down and pluck someone off a rickety wooden platform, never to be seen again. Then there's the question of magic. Some Kruleboyz dabble in the dark arts. They revere Mork, god of cunning, and believe magic is just another sneaky weapon. But swamp magic is fickle. A swamp Kala shaman might brew potions that dissolve armor or summon choking green mists. Yet every spell risks attracting the attention of swamp spirits. Or worse, the Ghurish realm's primal energy. Magic can turn against you, boiling your blood, twisting your body, or warping your mind until you're little more than a croaking, slime-covered husk. And yet Kruleboyz keep experimenting, because what's more cunning than turning your enemy's own blood into acid mid-fight? Still, if you're a Kruleboy, you'd always wonder, will my own brew melt my insides one day? And while we're on the subject of the environment, let's talk predators. In Ghur, everything wants to eat you. Imagine slogging through knee-deep swamp when the water suddenly explodes as a razorgrot lunges for your throat. Or a mere brute Troggoth emerges from the bog, swinging a massive club that splinters bone and flings you into the reeds like a ragdoll. And if it's not beasts, it's the terrain itself. Quicksand, razor-sharp reeds, poisonous fungus spores. Even the trees are suspicious. Some drip corrosive sap, others snatch at you with hanging vines. Your home is a realm trying its very best to kill you every minute of every day. And let's not forget your enemies. Storm-cast Eternals crash down from the heavens, shields gleaming and hammers crackling with lightning. To them, you're vermin to be purged. Cities of Sigmar patrol the outskirts of the swamps, hunting Kruleboy encampments. Daughters of Kani stalk through the marshes, blades gleaming in the mist. And if the Sylvaneth catch you chopping down too many trees, well, the less said about that, the better. But still, you skulk, you plot, you wait. Because Kruleboyz believe patience is a weapon. Let the big lads smash into the enemy ranks. Let Stormcast patrols get tired and sloppy. Let the swamp hide you until the perfect moment arrives. And when it does, you strike from the shadows, with blades coated in swamp venom and nets woven to entangle even the mightiest warriors. Victory, to a Kruleboy, is measured in the sound of enemies gurgling their last breath beneath the bog's dark surface. Yet after all that, the realm moves on. Your triumphs fade into the swamp mist. Your name, if it was ever known, is forgotten. Another Kruleboy rises to take your place, equally eager to poison, backstab, or vanish. And if you're lucky, someday someone might say, there was once a cunning Kruleboy who pulled off the greatest trick, but no one ever remembers his name. So you'd wake up each dawn in that stinking bog, rub the sleep from your yellow eyes and ask yourself, why did I have to be born a Kruleboy? Or worse yet, you might not wake up at all, because in the mists of Ghur, there's always something sharper, meaner, or more cunning than you. One day, it could be a rival Kruleboy sticking a knife in your ribs while you sleep, hoping to take your shiny new skull trophy collection. Another day, it could be a monstrous reptile bursting from the muck, jaws wide enough to bite a Moor Crucier in half. The swamp whispers sometimes, hissing voices you can't see, speaking secrets that twist your thoughts into knots. Some Kruleboys claim they've heard Mork himself chuckling in those whispers, tempting them toward ever greater acts of treachery and cruelty. But others reckon it's just the swamp spirits, old and bitter, looking for new puppets to possess. And if those spirits decide you're a tasty vessel, well, next thing you know, your own lads are cutting you down because your eyes glow green and your skin's crawling with tendrils of creeping moss. But let's say you manage to keep your wits about you. You learn how to play the long game. You survive the rivalries, the beasts, the backstabbing, and the constant threat of the swamp itself. So now, what's your reward? You keep living in a leaking hut made from snapped branches and stitched together hides, knee-deep in a swamp that's never quiet. You keep squatting around, bubbling cauldrons, hoping your next potion won't turn your insides into sludge. You keep sharpening your blade, watching your mates out of the corner of your eye, because you can never be sure who's about to stick you. And all for what? A few moments of triumph. The chance to watch a mighty Stormcast Eternal drown in the swamp. The fleeting taste of victory when an ambush goes off perfectly and enemy soldiers vanish beneath the muck. But Kruleboyz know one thing better than anyone. Glory fades. No matter how clever your scheme, how lethal your traps, how many skulls you collect, the swamp always reclaims everything. One day your bones will be just another pile beneath the waters. Your name will become another faint whisper among the reeds. So why is it bad to wake up as a Kruleboy? Because even if you survive, your entire life is mud, venom, paranoia, and the certainty that no matter how cunning you are, the swamp is always more cunning still.